Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. Let's get straight to the show today. First, who is funding Nick Reiner's expensive defense? Brian Walsh officially finds out his fate. Luige Mangione, well, his hearing is finally complete. Is there another Gilgo Beach Killer? Why can't they find the suspect from Brown University? Two kids decide, well, it's all about the money. A woman was arrested for kidnapping a child 40 years ago that she raised as her daughter. We've got this day in legal history, a quote of the day regarding the adversarial system, and our dumb criminal of the day. Let's talk about it.
All right, lawyer.
Good day, everyone. My name is Scott Reich, and this is Crime Talk. Thanks for joining us. You know the drill. Subscribe if you haven't, like if you do, leave me a comment below, and make sure you hit that little bell for notifications. We've had lots of people tell us, for some reason, I don't get notices anymore. That's why I keep telling you, make sure you hit that little bell so that you get notifications of when we go live or put up new content. All right, let's go ahead and open the record for today, December 18th, 2025. And first on the docket, who is paying for Nick Reiner's defense? That's right. Apparently a family insider has disclosed that the estate of the late filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle are going to be covering legal fees for their son Nick Reiner, who faces charges in their death. Now, this raises a lot of questions. Who's in charge of the estate? Maybe there's a trustee that we don't know about, but I don't think the brothers and sister of Nick Reiner are saying, hey, we got to go get an attorney, the top celebrity attorney in California, to represent Nick Reiner. Seems a little odd to me. Anyway, this arrangement aims to support the potential insanity plea, potentially directing Nick towards, maybe spending the rest of his life in a mental health facility where some could possibly say he belonged, versus spending his life in prison and possibly facing the death penalty. So where are we at? So Nick Reiner, he's 32. He had his first appearance in court yesterday, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Like I said, he's represented by Alan Jackson, the most prominent high-profile attorney kind of as of right now. Well, why do we think that? Well, he represented Harvey Weinstein. Things didn't actually turn out great for him there, but, can't win them all. He also represented Kevin Spacey. Now, Jackson previously prosecuted music producer Phil Spector when he was still at the district attorney's office. And obviously, he was successful in the representation of Karen Reed in Massachusetts. Now, it's been reported that he charges a paltry $2,000 per hour, according to people familiar with his billing practices. Now, when questioned about his retention and payment, Alan Jackson declined to comment. And according to a longtime family friend close to the Reiners, including Rob's father, the late actor and director Carl Reiner, relatives have authorized the use of the estate funds to retain Jackson. And apparently, like I said, this source indicated that the family members prefer an outcome where Nick, if ultimately convicted, is placed in a mental institution for life rather than prison. Now, this decision reflects Nick's documented history of mental health challenges and substance abuse issues, which reportedly began as early as 15. Mental health issues apparently presented themselves even earlier. The drugs really hit 15, and he entered rehab at age 15 as well, and he has been to rehab at least 17 different times. Talk about a high rep learner. Maybe it didn't either get through, or maybe he just can't be fixed. Anyway, the source also described Nick as deeply troubled with episodes of violence and aggression that strained family relationships. Rob and Michelle Reiner were obviously both found deceased in their Brentwood home on December 15th of 2025 with multiple sharp force injuries. And they had done everything they could, reportedly, to doing everything to support their son. Now, the couple attended a holiday party hosted by comedian Conan O'Brien the previous evening, where Nick allegedly engaged in disputes with guests. Now, like I said, the Reiner's estate is estimated approximately about $200 to $500 million, amassed through Rob Reiner's career as a director, producer, and founder of Castle Rock Entertainment, which has produced hits like When Harry Met Sally, and also the sitcom Seinfeld. Additional assets include his Brentwood mansion, originally purchased for $4.75 million back in 1991, and now is estimated to be worth about $13 million. They have a tennis court, a swimming pool, some gardens, your normal Hollywood mansion. Anyway, the family also owns a $15 million beachfront property in Malibu. Now, under California's Slayer statute, individuals convicted of killing another are barred from inheriting from their victims. However, this does not prevent other relatives from allocating estate resources. And obviously, if there's even a trust set up, that would get around the estate as well. Now, Rob and Michelle, they were married back in 1989. They had 3 kids together, Jake, who's 34, Nick, 32, and Romy, 27. Rob also has a daughter, Tracy, who is 61 from his prior marriage to Penny Marshall. Now, a second family source has apparently confirmed that Rob Reiner has long expressed intentions to donate a substantial portion of his wealth to charitable causes, emphasizing self-reliance for his children. Now, while the exact term of the will remains undisclosed, if there is one, I'm sure he had trusts and things like that set up so that basically no one would ever have to get to see his estate in public. But you never know. Sometimes people just don't get around to doing these types of things. Anyway, either way, it's going to be a significant inheritance. But much of the estate would support philanthropy aligned with the couple's value, including initiatives to underprivileged children. Now, Rob Reiner, like I said, he was 78 at the time of his death, was a noted activist and philanthropist, and he supported ballot measures like Prop 10 in 1998, which imposed a cigarette tax to fund early childhood education and healthcare. He also founded the American Foundation for Equal Rights to advocate for marriage equality and hosted fundraisers for political figures such as Hillary Clinton. Tributes from public figures underscore the couple's contributions. The Los Angeles mayor, Karen Bass, described the Reiners as someone who used his gifts in service and others. Jane Fonda called them wonderful, caring, smart, funny, generous people, while Demi Moore highlighted their role as amazing people and wonderful parents who gave of themselves to make the world a better place. Now, obviously, this case could last several months, if not years, depending on how this case proceeds. Is there going to be a mental health defense, i.e., mental health issues, that some mental disease or defect that impaired Nick Reiner's ability to understand right from wrong? Guess what? Got to have a bunch of doctors doing that. And I assure you the defense is already getting their list of doctors lined up to go and talk to Nick Reiner and see what they're going to have to work with. First, they're going to have to address issues of competency. Does he even understand or appreciate the proceedings around him? Does he appreciate right or wrong? Does he know the roles of the people in the courtroom? Pretty low standard for competency. And then if you want to do the not guilty by reason of insanity, the state's going to have their doctors talk to him, but the defense, if they were doing it right, like Mr. Jackson probably will, he will have his doctors first and say, when they get to arraignment, not guilty by reason of insanity. Oh yeah, and by the way, here's our report by our respected doctor. That's the way it should be done. Anyway, Reiner did appear in court yesterday in his little suicide prevention vest during the hearing. Obviously, concerns as it relates to his mental state. Now, the entertainment industry continues to mourn the loss of the director and actor. I get it. He's a popular guy, right? And police and the coroner have confirmed that the couple died from multiple sharp force injuries, and it was classified as a homicide, which obviously, as you know, is a true CrimeTalk aficionado, that you either have homicide, accident, suicide, or undetermined as the manner of death. And when it is a death by another person, it's classified as a homicide. So, like I said, Reiner's been charged with those 2 counts of first-degree murder, and he's alleged to have used his knives as a deadly weapon. Prosecutors have indicated that the charges could carry a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, as well as the death penalty, although there's no decision on pursuing the death penalty in this particular case. Now, since the prosecutors would have to consult with the family, more than likely the family would not go along with the death penalty, but ultimately that is the prosecutor's decision, but the defense would clearly, if it got that far. I just don't see this going that route, but we'll have to see. It's going to be clearly mental health defense. You're going to have to say that the mental health issues are what did it, because just being high on drugs is no defense in this particular case. Just by way of a little more background, obviously the Reiners were found about Sunday afternoon, December 14th at about 3:30 in the afternoon. Apparently a scheduled masseuse had arrived but couldn't gain access, prompting him to call the couple's daughter, Romy Reiner. She, accompanied by a roommate, entered the property and discovered her father's body, leading obviously to an immediate 911 call. Paramedics subsequently located Michelle Singer Reiner's body, and at the time, Romy informed responders that her brother Nick resided in a guest house on the property, though no suspicion was directed towards him initially. Nick was not present at the scene. And like I said, the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner has officially listed the manner of death as homicide, dated December 14th. Now, Nick Reiner, the middle child of the couple's 3 offspring, preceded by brother Jake and Romy, has a documented history of substance abuse challenges. He entered rehab, like I said, his first time at 15 and experienced periods of homelessness during his teenage years. In public interviews, Nick has described difficult episodes, including extended time on the streets. And after achieving sobriety around age 19, he collaborated with his father on the 2015 semi-biographical film Being Charlie, which explored themes of addiction and the family strain. Now, Rob Reiner had previously expressed optimism about his son's progress in recent interviews, but prosecutors allege that Nick's fatally stabbed his parents, obviously, and, apparently he wasn't over everything. But we also know that on the evening of December 13th, Rob and Michelle Reiner attended the holiday party hosted by Conan O'Brien. Accounts vary, but some attendees report unusual behavior from Nick, who accompanied his parents despite not being formally invited. Concerns had reportedly arisen regarding his recent conduct, prompting the couple to monitor him quite closely. And descriptions include instances of prolonged staring or inquiries about guests' fame and possible confrontation involving Rob Reiner. However, sources close to the family have characterized these interactions as less intense than portrayed in the press, noting that the family's long familiarity with managing such challenges. Now, Nick Reiner was apprehended on the evening of December 14th in the Exposition Park area near the University of Southern California, which is about 15 miles from the family home. He was booked early the following morning and is being held without bail. Surveillance footage has emerged showing him at a convenience store prior to his arrest. And like I said, the formal charges were announced, and the district attorney describes the case as heartbreaking. The arraignment has been postponed until January 7th, and the defense counsel emphasized that the complexity of the issues involved called for careful examination. Now, police have not disclosed a potential motive, and questions remain about Nick's movements post-incident, including a reported stay at a Santa Monica hotel. Siblings Jake and Romy Reiner issued a statement expressing profound grief. The horrific and devastating loss of our parents is something that no one should ever experience. They were not just our parents, they were our best friends. They requested privacy and compassion amid speculation. Obviously, the investigation is active, and further details are expected as the legal process unfolds. Let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be an interesting case no matter what happens. It's interesting to me, first, that the estate would hire Alan Jackson. And I really wonder, is that true? Or did Alan Jackson say, ooh, pick me, I'll do it for free for the notoriety of this particular case, to do the case pro bono, free of charge. Now, I certainly wouldn't recommend that to Mr. Jackson, but he can do what he wants, right? It's his time, his billable hours. But yeah, a death penalty case like that, you're probably talking at least $1 million for a good defense, probably not even including additional expenses related to the experts that you would need in that particular case. So the bottom line is, whoever's paying for it, hey, it's going to be expensive. I'm just a little surprised the family did it. And I still wouldn't be surprised if Alan Jackson volunteered his services. I guess we'll ultimately wait and see. But remember, technically, that's really none of our business. Who's paying for it? It could be an anonymous source, family friend, anybody. Who knows? But I'm not sure anybody has any sufficient control at this point where they can say, oh, don't worry, the estate will pay for it. Interesting indeed. Next, Brian Walsh learns his fate. That's right. We brought it to you here today on Crime Talk. Brian Walsh has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for killing his wife hours after they hosted a New Year's Eve party. Now, Walsh was sentenced Thursday after being found guilty of first-degree murder on Monday, nearly 3 years after his real estate executive wife, Anna Walsh, vanished back on January 1st of 2023. Now, the case hit headlines when prosecutors said Walsh searched online for dismemberment and, the best ways to dispose of a body. Jurors rejected Mr. Walsh's claim that Anna died suddenly at the age of 39 at their home. And then, therefore, what do you have to do? That's right. Chop her up into little pieces and dispose of her body around town. Not very plausible defense. Anyway, the real estate executive, Anna, shared 3 sons with her killer husband, who were aged 2 and 6 at the time of her death. The judge sentenced Walsh, finally bringing closure to this case, and gave the maximum penalty of life in prison. The judge said, quote, "The sentence is immensely appropriate, and just given your murderous acts and the life trauma that you've inflicted upon your own children, the judge said it was worth it. The seriousness of your acts cannot be overstated. Your acts in dismembering your wife's body and disposing of her remains in multiple area dumpsters can only be described as barbaric and incomprehensible. You had no regard for the lifelong mental harm that your criminal acts inflicted on your then 2, 4, and 6-year-old sons." End quote. Anyway, Walsh was charged originally with first-degree murder, willfully conveying a human body in violation of state law, and obviously misleading police in the death of his wife. Days before the trial began, he pled guilty to 2 lesser charges, but denied murdering Anna. The judge gave Walsh the mandatory sentence for first-degree murder, obviously, along with a consecutive sentence of 20 years for misleading police and 3 years for improper conveyance of a body. Isn't that crazy? Chop up a body, you only can get the maximum sentence of 3 years in Massachusetts. Lie to the cops, get 20? What can you say, ladies and gentlemen? Anyway, that case is over. That case turned out exactly the way I thought it was going to turn out. When you have searches for dismembering bodies and your best defense is she died suddenly, instead of dialing 911 or calling for an emergency personnel, you decided to just chop her up and to dispose of her body. Yeah, that's not going to work. Even jurors in Massachusetts figured that one out. Next, the marathon motions hearing in the Luige Mangione case is over. That's right. The prolonged evidentiary hearing in the New York State murder case against Luige Mangione, the man accused of fatally shooting United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, concluded today in Manhattan Supreme Court. Justice Gregory Caro announced that he anticipates issuing a ruling on the defense motion to suppress key evidence by May 18th, at which time the trial date will be established. The 9-day hearing focused on whether certain evidence obtained during Mangione's arrest should be admissible in court in his upcoming trial. Prosecutors presented testimony from 17 witnesses, primarily law enforcement officers involved in the apprehension and the processing of Mangione in Altoona, Pennsylvania. The defense elected to not present any witnesses, resting their case without further testimony. Well, you may say, what does that matter? Well, when the defense raises the issue of an unconstitutional search and seizure, the burden then shifts to the prosecution to prove by clear and convincing evidence that the evidence and the statements were obtained voluntarily. That's why the state called all of the witnesses and the defense, didn't. Usually the defense only has to establish, it carries the burden on cases, usually when it involves trying to suppress unreasonably suggestive photo arrays and lineups and things of that nature. Anyway, for those who are not familiar with the case, Mr. Mangione stands accused of shooting CEO Brian Thompson on December 4th of 2024 outside a Midtown Manhattan hotel where the executive was attending an investor conference. Police allege that the attack was targeted. Mangione was apprehended days later at the McDonald's restaurant in Altoona following a nationwide manhunt prompted by public tips. He faces separate federal charges, some of which carry the potential of capital punishment. Now, central to the hearing were the defense arguments seeking to exclude physical items seized from Mangione's backpack, including, a firearm, a magazine, and not the type you're going to read like People. No, a magazine for a firearm, and a notebook containing writings on grounds that the search was conducted without a warrant. Of course it was. It was done search incident to an arrest. Officer safety, inevitable discovery. But the defense says, nope, they potentially violated the constitutional protections against unreasonable search and seizure. Additionally, the defense contended that certain statements made by Mangione should be suppressed due to the timing of when he was advised of his Miranda rights. Now, Justice Caro has directed the defense to submit its final written brief by January 29th of next month. And obviously, the prosecution must be given time to respond. So their briefs are due on March 5th of 2026. The defense will then have 2 weeks to file a reply brief if they deem it necessary. Now, obviously, there's a lot of attention highlighting the procedural questions surrounding the arrest and evidence collection of Mr. Mangione. And obviously, he's entered a plea of not guilty and is entitled to the presumption of innocence. Now, the outcome of the suppression motion will substantially influence the scope of the evidence available to the prosecutors in the state case. Now, let's just assume, hypothetically, that all of the evidence was found to be obtained illegally. Well, it would certainly make it much more difficult for the prosecution to present a case, right? You wouldn't have the basically confessions and the statements of premeditation in the journal. You wouldn't have the murder weapon, but guess what? You still have the video, and you still have the fact that he was arrested and then he fit the description. So it wouldn't make the case impossible to proceed, but it would make it much more difficult possibly to get a conviction. Now, do I reasonably believe that this judge is going to throw out all the evidence? No, I don't think so. A district court judge, for the most part, let's face it, they just don't have the guts to do this in a high-profile case like this. And I'm not saying he should. I'm just saying he wouldn't. Most judges are saying, hey, if I get it wrong, let the appellate court sort it out, but I'm going to err on the side of the prosecution. Not saying it's right, not saying it's wrong, just saying that's just usually the way it's done, ladies and gentlemen. Next, why can't they find a suspect in the Brown University shooting? So on December 13th of this year, a mass shooting occurred at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, inside the Barris and Holly building, which houses the School of Engineering and Physics department. Now, this incident took place about 4 p.m. Eastern time during final examination week. This was actually a study hall session for people preparing for exams. And a single gunman opened fire, killing 2 Brown University students, Ella Cook and Muhammad Aziz Umakozoa, and injuring 9 others, all of whom were students. Several of the injured were initially reported in critical condition, though some have since been released from the hospital. As of December 18th, today, the manhunt for the suspect remains ongoing, entering its 6th day. Police, which include the Providence Police Department there in Rhode Island, the FBI, as well as the university police, have released surveillance footage and enhanced images of the person of interest described as a male, approximately 5'8", with a stocky build wearing a mask. Now, a 9mm handgun was used in the attack. An initial person of interest was detained and later released without charges as the evidence didn't support their involvement. No motive has been publicly disclosed, and officials have stated that there is no evidence indicating that the shooting was targeting a specific individual. Now, there's been some speculation, and you have to keep it in the speculation bucket, so to speak, regarding the killing of the MIT professor on December 15th. That was Nuno F.G. Loureiro, Loureiro. A 47-year-old professor of nuclear science and engineering at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology was fatally shot in his home in Massachusetts. Now, the incident is under a separate investigation, but clearly is a homicide. And law enforcement sources and the FBI have stated that there is no known apparent connection between the Brown University shooting and the death of the professor. We'll have to wait and see. Now, concerning a suspect named Mustafa, or similar, such as Mustafa Karbuk, no official suspect has been officially named by authorities at Brown University at all. And speculation arose because on social media that Brown has, as well as their website, the student named Mustafa, they reportedly removed his profile page from its website. However, the Brown University and the Rhode Island Attorney General, Peter Nerano, have condemned this as harmful doxing and unfounded rumors, emphasizing that there are multiple possible reasons for profile changes and no evidence ties this individual to the crime. Officials have warned against disseminating such unverified claims. We're not saying he's a suspect. We're just saying some people say that he may be a person we want to talk to. And there was a coincidence that they thought that, coincidentally, the day after the shooting, everything was taken down from the university and all of his social media went blank as well. Probably just a coincidence. Anyway, if the Rhode Island police and the FBI get around to arresting somebody in that case, we'll be the first to bring it to you. But here we are, still waiting and waiting. Now, there have been claims to be a lot easier if some of the video cameras hadn't been taken down. Who takes video cameras down these days? That's crazy, isn't it? Next, is there another Gilgo Beach Killer? A 66-year-old retired Army veteran and former law enforcement officer from Florida appeared in Nassau County Court on Thursday, where he pled not guilty to second-degree murder charges in connection with the 1997 death of Tanya Denise Jackson, a 26-year-old fellow veteran and mother of his child. Now, Andrew Dykes, who previously served as a Tennessee state trooper and corrections officer, was arraigned following his extradition from Tampa, Florida. He faces allegations related to the killing of Jackson, whose dismembered remains were discovered at the Hempstead Lake State Park that year. The case has long been associated with the broader investigation into the multiple human remains found near Gilgo Beach on Long Island, though police are now emphasizing that Jackson's death resulted from domestic violence rather than, a serial killer. Now, during the court proceedings, prosecutors highlighted Dykes' background as a military instructor in anatomy and physiology, noting his specialized knowledge that allegedly enabled precise dismemberment of the victim's body. DNA evidence obtained from surveillance in Florida last year recovered from discarded items reportedly matched samples from the crime scene. More genetic genealogy, ladies and gentlemen. Well, Jackson, a Gulf War veteran from Alabama, met Dykes while both were stationed at Fort Sam Houston in Texas. The two entered into an extramarital relationship, resulting in the birth of their daughter, Tatiana Marie, in 1995. Dykes assisted Jackson in relocating near his subsequent post at Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn. Jackson's torso was initially found in 1997 inside a container in the state park, identifiable primarily by a distinctive peach tattoo. Additional remains, along with those of her toddler daughter, were located in 2011 during searches along the Ocean Parkway amid the Gilgo Beach probe. Advanced DNA analysis and genetic genealogy led to the victim's identification in April of 2025. Now, the Nassau County District Attorney Ann Donnelly stated that following the arraignment that the evidence points to an act of violence perpetrated by someone the victim trusted, distancing the case from the serial murder theories. Now, while Tatiana's death occurred around the same time period, prosecutors believe that there is insufficient evidence that currently exists to file charges against Dykes in those matter. Dykes' attorney described him as a respected figure and longtime career person in the military and in law enforcement, asserting intentions to contest the DNA evidence. Now, obviously, he is going to remain in custody. The next appearance is now set for January 16th of 2026. Now, remember, the Gilgo Beach investigation has uncovered remains of at least 10 individuals, with some attributable to multiple perpetrators using the remote area for disposal. Architect Rex Heuermann faces charges in 7 related killings and has entered not guilty pleas awaiting trial. Police have clarified that no connection between Heuermann and the Jackson case. I bet Mr. Jackson will try to say that there is a connection in the Gilgo Beach case, but once again, that pesky DNA evidence is going to be difficult to overcome. Next, 2 young kids determine it's all about the money. Yeah, let's go to Clovis, New Mexico, where police have charged 2 individuals with first-degree murder following the shooting deaths of a local couple on December 15th. The victims, identified as 58-year-old Oscar Steve Munoz and his 71-year-old wife Dina Munoz, were discovered in their bedrooms with fatal gunshot wounds to the head. Police obviously responded to the residence about 4:50 a.m. after receiving a 911 call reporting a possible burglary in process. Upon arrival, officers encountered 19-year-old Darren Munoz, the son of the victims, who initially stated that conditions in the home were normal. He reportedly expressed reluctance to allow officers inside, citing that his parents were asleep. Officers proceeded to enter and located the victims in their bed. Dina Munoz was pronounced dead at the scene, while Oscar Munoz was transported to a hospital where he later died from his injuries. Police found no evidence of forced entry and no reported missing items, indicating that the incident was not a random burglary. Darren Munoz provided an account stating that he had heard a garage door alarm, but not gunshots, which police deemed inconsistent given the proximity of the bedrooms. Subsequent interviews and evidence collection revealed an alleged plot. According to the arrest affidavit, witnesses informed police that Darren Munoz had discussed plans over several weeks or months to eliminate his parents to get to their finances. One witness acquainted with Darren Munoz reported that he sought to assume control of the family assets. Darren Munoz's girlfriend told investigators that he desired his father's money and had arranged for 18-year-old Julio Zamora to carry out the shooting in exchange for a share of the anticipated inheritance. Darren Munoz reportedly believed his father owned the Allsup's convenience store chain. However, records indicate Oscar Munoz served only as a regional manager for the company. Evidence included text messages and video communications between Darren Munoz and Zamora, coordinating the victims' return from their anniversary trip and the execution of the plan. Security footage allegedly captured Darren Munoz handling a firearm shortly before the incident. Additionally, Zamora was arrested in possession of a 9mm Glock handgun, which had reportedly admitted was the weapon used in the crime. How convenient. Police also recovered ammunition explicitly purchased for the alleged purpose of death. Darren Munoz faces 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder, and 1 count of criminal solicitation to commit murder. Julio Zamora faces 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder. Both individuals are detained at the Curry County Adult Detention Center, and they're being held without bond. They are scheduled to appear in court on December 22nd. So just in a couple of days. Anyway, the police continue to investigate the case. Wow. A woman was arrested for abducting a child 40 years ago. So the woman arrested after 40 years for abducting a child. Friends actually thought that the police were joking during the arrest. They even said, "Oh, look, they're coming for you, Sharon." The friend joked, but the woman named is not Sharon. Her real name is Deborah Newton, and she created an entirely new life and remarried after allegedly abducting a 3-year-old 40 years before. Now, the 3-year-old, Michelle Newton, was abducted from Kentucky back in 1983 by her custodial mother, Deborah. Newton was on the FBI's top 8 most wanted parental kidnapping fugitives at one point. The case was dismissed in 2000, and Michelle was removed from the missing child database. In 2025, however, a Crime Stoppers tip identified Deborah, now 66, with the new name. in the villages in Florida. Photo and DNA evidence from her sister confirmed the match. Now, Michelle, who is now 46, has been living with a different name, completely unaware that she was abducted and had been in the missing child database for 2 decades. After being notified by police that she was not who she thought she was, Newton contacted her father. "She always has been in our heart," he explained, and I can't explain that moment of walking in and getting to put my arms around my daughter. That was according to Joseph Newton, who is the dad, who said, I wouldn't trade that moment for anything. It's just like seeing her when she was first born. She was like an angel. Can you imagine that, ladies and gentlemen? Not knowing really what was going on. And one day, 45 years later, you find out. Wow. All right, next on the docket, this day in legal history, December 18th, 1865. The 13th Amendment is declared in effect. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The Secretary of State, William H. Seward, formally certified that the 13th Amendment had been ratified by the requisite number of states, making it part of the Constitution and abolishing slavery. This date, 1899. What did the Supreme Court do? Well, the court allowed a Georgia county to close its only black public high school while maintaining white schools, effectively endorsing racial segregation in education. Obviously, that approach was later overturned by Brown v. Board of Education. Now, we talked about this briefly the other night on our live program where somebody was saying, well, the Supreme Court, they can't overturn precedent stare decisis. Yes, Supreme Courts and other courts overrule cases all the time. It really does happen all the time. And could you imagine if we said, well, you can't overrule Brown v. Board of Education? What if they had said, oh, no, you can't overrule Dred Scott, which says that, slaves were not people and they couldn't bring suit in the court. And then obviously this case stating that separate but equal was okay, or just eliminating education for black people in the South. No, that was wrong. And the court got it wrong, and then they reversed it. But as we talked about, the law becomes its own opposite while maintaining itself as a rational body of discourse. You have to explain why you were wrong and explain the new precedent how you got there. That's why it makes it the law. You have to explain how you get there. You can't just say because. Provide a rational explanation so people understand it and can say, oh, I guess you're right. On this date, 1917, Congress approved the resolution submitting the 18th Amendment to the United States, setting the stage for prohibition by banning the manufacture, sale, and transportation of intoxicating liquors. Once ratified, obviously it was ratified and then repealed. So even the people can change their mind, which is the majesty of the United States Constitution. It lets you realize that we are all flawed individuals, and sometimes we can make mistakes, but the Constitution allows for a way to change it. How about a legal quote of the day? How about a quote regarding the adversarial judicial system, which is characteristic of common law jurisdictions such as obviously the United States and the United Kingdom? How about this from Lord Patrick Devlin in his work as a judge? Quote, "It can also be argued that two prejudiced searchers starting from opposite ends of the field will between them be less likely to miss anything the impartial searchers starting at the middle." Obviously, this statement defends the adversarial process by suggesting that vigorous partisan advocacy of opposing parties is more effective at uncovering the full truth than a neutral, centralized inquiry typical of Inquisition-type systems. It underscores the philosophical foundation that competition between advocates enhances the reliability of judicial outcomes. I totally believe that in the adversarial system, ladies and gentlemen. The truth, or a pretty darn close version of the truth, is going to come out. You know, one person says a person is guilty, the prosecutor. The defense says he's not guilty, he didn't do it. Then the prosecutor says, well, I got this evidence. And he says, okay, you've got this evidence, but it's not exactly right. And then the prosecutor looks at it, it's like, okay, maybe they didn't do this, but they did something real close to that. And then the other side, well, yeah, I can agree that he did that. The truth, or a pretty darn close version of it, will come out. And When you have two people battling for what they believe is the truth, you're going to get closer to it. That's why we believe in free speech, ladies and gentlemen. You can't silence somebody else's opinion just because you don't like it or it's going to hurt your feelings. You're getting closer to the truth. Go with that. And then finally, our dumb criminal of the day. Thing got a little wild at the gym. So in a spectacle that proved the judgment-free zone has its limits, a 35-year-old woman transformed a routine gym visit into a full-blown brawl, vaulting over the front desk to deliver a fury of punches to a hapless employee. And now meet Kiara Bryant. She now faces misdemeanor charges of battery and disorderly conduct following the chaotic episode at a Planet Fitness in Little Havana. This whole drama unfolded back on December 12th at the gym located at the Southwest 8th Street, beginning innocently enough with loud outbursts in the locker room. When a staff member politely requested Bryant to, tone it down or risk a police call, she reportedly invaded his personal space, prompting him to push her away twice in self-defense. Undeterred, Ms. Bryant escalated the workout in the worst possible way, slipping behind the counter, chasing the flea employee in a bizarre game of cat and mouse around the desk, and finally leaping over it like an Olympian to land repeated closed fist blows to his nose. Not content with indoor antics, Bryant allegedly continued the commotion outside, shouting profanities and challenging bystanders to scraps in the parking lot while attempting a getaway in her car. Police, initially dispatched for reports of a woman running without clothing, arrived to find her in full confrontation mode. In a twist of candid confessions, Bryant reportedly told officers she had flinched aggressively at the employee after he addressed her behavior and, yes, admitted to the battery. Flinched aggressively. She was taken into custody without further resistance. Bond set at a modest $150. Of course, Planet Fitness emphasized their zero tolerance policy for violence, confirming the safety of their members is paramount at all times. As for Bryant, her membership has likely been canceled permanently, and police note that the employee did suffer injuries, including a possible broken nose. Make it a felony, highlighting how simple a little simple request for quiet turned into anything but a peaceful day. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have for today. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you tomorrow. And remember, the Constitution matters.